Put down the mop and get out. Men like you don't belong in this room." 32 executives burst into laughter. But Marcus, the black janitor, didn't say a word. He simply lowered his eyes and tightened his grip around the worn wooden mop handle. No one noticed the faded military insignia hidden beneath his collar. And the CEO had no idea. The man he had just humiliated was the only person who knew their $11 billion defense system was about to fail. Just then, the secure phone rang. The call was from the Pentagon, and the man they asked to speak with was Marcus. Why did the Pentagon know the name of a janitor? Stay with us until the end. Because the secret Marcus had been hiding would leave the entire room speechless. The CEO humiliated the black janitor in front of everyone. Then the Pentagon called his name. Part 1. The man with the mop. Put the mop down and get out. Men like you don't belong in rooms where important decisions are made. The words struck harder because everyone heard them. 32 executives sat beneath the cold white lights of the Atlas Aeronautics auditorium. Beyond the glass walls, rain dragged silver lines across the Washington skyline. The clouds hung low over the city, swallowing the tops of distant buildings. Inside, the air smelled of polished marble, expensive coffee, and the faint electrical heat of a 40-foot presentation screen. No one moved. At the center of the room stood Richard Caldwell, Chief Executive Officer of Atlas Aeronautics. His charcoal suit had been tailored in London. His silver watch cost more than some employees earned in a year. Every movement carried the confidence of a man who had spent decades entering rooms where people stood before he asked them to. Behind him, enormous white letters glowed across the screen. Aegis Vector, the future of national defense. The system had taken 7 years to develop. 300 engineers had worked on it. The Department of Defense contract was worth $11 billion. If the demonstration succeeded, Atlas would become the largest private defense technology company in the country. If it failed, Richard Caldwell's legacy would collapse with it. Near the back wall stood a black janitor holding a mop. His name was Marcus Reed, 58 years old. Gray touched the edges of his short hair. His blue maintenance uniform had faded at the elbows, and a small stitched patch rested above his heart. Marcus. Rainwater had collected near the auditorium entrance after a group of military officials walked inside. Marcus had been sent to clean it. That was all. He had entered quietly. He had placed a yellow warning sign beside the wet marble. Then, while moving the mop beneath the last row of chairs, he had looked up at the equations on the giant screen. At first, he only glanced. Then he stopped. The mop remained motionless beneath his hand. A line of mathematical code reflected faintly inside. His glasses. Marcus stared at it. His breathing changed. 23 years disappeared. For one terrible second, he was no longer standing inside Atlas Aeronautics. He was inside a military control room in Nevada. Red warning lights flashed across metal walls. A young engineer screamed for the simulation to be stopped. Someone shouted that the guidance correction was drifting. Then came static. A white flash. And silence. Marcus blinked. The auditorium returned. Richard was still speaking. At Mach 12, the CEO explained, Aegis Vector recalculates atmospheric deviation faster than any navigation system currently in operation. Applause moved through the room. Marcus looked again at the equation. His fingers tightened around the wooden mop handle. Something was wrong. Not obviously wrong. The code was elegant. The calculations were advanced. But beneath them was an old assumption. A dangerous one. Marcus looked toward the engineers seated near the stage. No one appeared concerned. He lowered his eyes. It was not his place. That was what people had told him for years. Stay quiet. Do your work. Take your paycheck. Go home. Marcus pushed the mop forward. Then Richard changed the simulation conditions. The projected aircraft accelerated. Numbers climbed across the screen. Marcus watched the correction loop begin. His stomach tightened. The same pattern. The same delay. The same mistake. He stopped cleaning. The guidance system will fail. His voice was quiet. But the room had become silent between presentation slides. Everyone heard him. Richard stopped speaking. For several seconds, he did not turn around. What did you say? Marcus held the mop with both hands. The correction loop, he answered. It compensates for atmospheric drift, but not delayed satellite input. Several executives looked at one another. Marcus continued. At high velocity, those two errors will amplify each other. An engineer near the stage lowered his tablet. Richard slowly faced him. Who are you? Marcus Reed, sir. What department? Building maintenance. A few people smiled. Richard looked toward the mop, then back at Marcus. You're the janitor. Yes, sir. And you believe the navigation platform will fail. I believe the correction model is incomplete. The room became still. Richard laughed. It was not warm laughter. It was the sound powerful people made when they wanted everyone else to know whom they were allowed to ridicule. Soon, several executives laughed with him. Marcus remained quiet. You clean floors, Richard said. Yes, sir. And you believe you understand a navigation platform designed by 300 engineers. Marcus looked toward the screen. I understand that equation. A woman near the front covered a smile with her hand. Someone whispered, this is unbelievable. Richard stepped down from the stage. His polished shoes struck the marble with slow, deliberate clicks. Marcus did not move. The distance between them closed. Richard was taller by several inches. His suit was dry and perfect. Marcus's work boots were wet from the rainwater he had been cleaning. Tell me, Richard said, where did you study aerospace engineering? Marcus hesitated. The pause was small, but Richard noticed. That's what I thought. He reached forward and took the mop from Marcus's hands. Perhaps you'd like to finish the presentation. Laughter moved across the auditorium. Marcus looked at the people laughing. Some were uncomfortable. Some looked away. Others seemed relieved that the humiliation belonged to someone else. Richard held out the mop like a microphone. Go ahead, he said. Explain advanced military navigation to us. Marcus looked toward the equation. The satellite delay creates a false correction. The laughter weakened. Richard's smile disappeared. At extreme velocity, Marcus continued. The system will interpret delayed coordinates as current position. It will correct for an error that no longer exists. One of the engineers leaned forward. Marcus pointed toward the screen. The aircraft will begin fighting its own guidance commands. Richard stared at him. And how long before failure? Marcus studied the numbers. 11 seconds. Silence. Then someone laughed again. Richard stepped closer. 11 seconds? Yes, sir. You calculated that while cleaning the floor? No, Marcus's eyes remained on the screen. I remembered it. Something changed in his voice. The room felt it. Richard did not. He dropped the mop. It struck the marble with a hollow crack. Dirty water spread across the floor. A dark line touched the edge of Marcus's worn work boots. Clean that, Richard said. Marcus looked down. The ceiling lights trembled inside the water. Richard turned toward the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why companies need boundaries. He walked back toward the stage. Everyone has a role. Problems begin when people forget theirs. A few executives nodded. Marcus bent down. He picked up the mop. No anger. No protest. Only the soft movement of wet cotton across stone. But as Richard resumed the presentation, Marcus looked once more at the equation. His eyes stopped on one line. His fingers tightened around the wooden handle. Because he had seen that exact mistake before. 23 years earlier. And people had died because no one listened. Part 2. The things people never asked. Marcus arrived at Atlas every morning at 4:40. The city was still dark then. Streetlights floated inside the mist, and delivery trucks moved through empty intersections like slow metal shadows. He rode 2 buses from a small apartment in southeast Washington. The first driver knew his name. Morning, Professor. Marcus always smiled. Morning, Leon. The nickname had begun as a joke. Years earlier, Leon had seen Marcus reading a book about orbital mechanics during the bus ride. After that, he called him Professor. Marcus never corrected him. The second bus driver only nodded. By 5:35, Marcus was inside the Atlas building. He cleaned fingerprints from glass doors, emptied trash cans, replaced paper towels, polished conference tables where people discussed contracts worth billions. Most employees never noticed him. Some left coffee cups inches from an empty trash bin. Some continued private conversations while he cleaned around them, as though his uniform made him unable to hear. Marcus never complained. He had learned long ago that invisibility could be painful, but it could also teach you things. People revealed themselves around those they considered unimportant. The kind ones said good morning. The cruel ones looked through him. The frightened ones spoke too loudly. And powerful people often confused silence with ignorance. Every afternoon, Marcus ate lunch beside the loading dock. He carried 2 sandwiches. One for himself. One for Daniel Brooks, a 24-year-old security guard who often forgot to bring food. You don't have to keep feeding me, Daniel said one afternoon. Marcus handed him a sandwich. You don't have to keep forgetting lunch. Daniel smiled. What is it today? Turkey. No mustard. Little mustard. You're a good man, Mr. Reed. Marcus looked toward the trucks beyond the loading dock. Good is something you do, not something you are. Daniel opened the sandwich. You always talk like that. Only when people interrupt my lunch. They laughed. Few people inside Atlas knew anything else about Marcus. They did not know that he had once attended the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They did not know that he had earned degrees in applied mathematics and aerospace guidance. They did not know that, at 31, he had become one of the youngest systems specialists assigned to a classified military navigation project. And no one knew why he had left. Marcus kept no photographs on his locker door. No diplomas. No newspaper articles. Only one small picture inside his wallet. 5 engineers standing beside a prototype aircraft. Marcus was the youngest. Beside him stood a woman with bright eyes and wind-blown hair. Dr. Evelyn Carter. His closest friend. The only person in the program who listened when he warned them. The photograph had been taken 6 days before she died. That evening, after Richard humiliated him, Marcus finished his shift. He cleaned the auditorium. He removed the coffee cups. He erased fingerprints from the glass. Then he stood alone before the giant screen. The presentation had ended hours earlier, but the final simulation remained frozen. Marcus studied the numbers. The building hummed around him. Rain tapped softly against the windows. He found a discarded marker beside the stage. Slowly, he approached a whiteboard. He wrote the first equation, then another. His hand moved faster. Old knowledge. Returned through his fingers. Variables. Correction intervals. Satellite latency. Atmospheric pressure. He filled half the board. Then he stopped. At the bottom, he wrote, failure window. 10.8 to 11.4 seconds. Marcus stared at the number. His reflection appeared faintly across the glass. For a moment, he saw a younger man. No gray hair. No janitor's uniform. Only an engineer wearing an identification badge. Then a voice came from the doorway. What are you doing? Marcus turned. A young woman stood there. Dr. Lena Ortiz. Lead guidance engineer for Aegis Vector. She was 36, with dark hair pulled behind her head and tired eyes that had spent too many nights beneath laboratory lights. She looked at the whiteboard, then at Marcus. Who wrote that? I did. Her eyes narrowed. You? Yes. She walked closer. At first, her expression carried suspicion. Then she began reading. Her face changed. Where did you get the satellite latency estimate? Your simulation. That information wasn't on the presentation. It was visible in the timing sequence. Lena looked back at the board. You calculated the failure interval from a visual sequence. Marcus placed the marker down. The pattern is familiar. What does that mean? He picked up his cleaning cart. It means you should test it. Wait. Marcus stopped. Who are you? He looked at the name stitched above his heart. You already know. No, Lena stepped closer. I know your name. I'm asking who you are. Marcus remained silent. Then the lights inside the auditorium dimmed automatically. Only the city remained beyond the windows. You should test the system, Marcus said. He pushed the cart toward the door. Behind him, Lena looked again at the equations. At the bottom of the board, beneath the failure window, Marcus had written 5 words. Do not ignore the second signal. She read them twice. Then she took out her phone. Part 3. The man who could not afford failure. Richard Caldwell did not sleep that night. At 2:17 in the morning, he stood inside his penthouse overlooking Washington. The city lights spread beneath him. His phone rested against his ear. The Pentagon demonstration is in 4 days, he said. Across the line, board chairman Leonard Pierce remained silent. Richard poured water into a glass. We are ready. Are you? Richard stopped. What is that supposed to mean? I heard about the janitor. Richard looked toward the window. Someone told you. 32 people watched you humiliate an employee. These things travel. He interrupted a classified presentation. He warned you about a technical problem. He cleans floors. That wasn't my question. Richard tightened his grip around the glass. The system passed every test. Then you have nothing to worry about. The call ended. Richard placed the phone down. For several seconds, he stood without moving. Then he opened an old wooden box beside the window. Inside was a photograph. A boy stood beside a small airplane. The boy was Richard. Behind him stood his father. Harold Caldwell had built aircraft engines. He believed machines rewarded discipline. He believed mistakes were weakness. and he believed weakness deserved punishment. When Richard was 12, he had built a model aircraft for a school competition. The left wing was uneven. His father looked at it for 3 seconds, then broke it in half. "Never show people unfinished work," he said. Richard remembered the sound more than the words. Thin wood snapping. Years later, when Richard became CEO of Atlas, his father attended the ceremony. He shook his son's hand. No hug, no smile, only one sentence. "Don't embarrass the family." Harold died 2 months later. Richard had spent the next 20 years trying to impress a man who was no longer alive. Aegis Vector was supposed to be his final victory, his proof, his legacy. And now a janitor had stood inside his auditorium and predicted failure in 11 seconds. Richard opened his laptop. He watched the presentation recording. Marcus appeared near the back wall. Quiet. Still. Richard replayed the warning. "The aircraft will begin fighting its own guidance commands." He paused the video. Marcus's face remained on the screen. There had been no arrogance, no desire for attention, only certainty. Richard closed the laptop, then opened it again. At 3:08, he called Lena Ortiz. She answered after 4 rings. "Richard, run another simulation." Silence. "What conditions?" "Satellite delay." Another pause. "How much?" Richard looked toward the frozen image of Marcus. 11 seconds. Part 4. The test at 6:10 the next morning. Lena stood inside the Atlas simulation laboratory. Blue monitors illuminated the room. 12 engineers sat behind computer stations. Richard watched from the observation deck. "Begin," he ordered. The virtual aircraft accelerated. Mach 4. Mach 7. Mach 10. Everything remained stable. An engineer smiled. "Guidance nominal." Mach 12. Lena entered the satellite delay. The aircraft adjusted. 1 second. 2. 3. No failure. Richard crossed his arms. "Continue." 5 seconds. The correction rate increased. 7. A warning appeared. Lena leaned forward. "Guidance oscillation." 9 seconds. Red lights spread across 3 monitors. The aircraft shifted left, then right. The navigation system attempted to correct. Each command made the error larger. 10 seconds. The virtual aircraft began spinning. 10.8. Every monitor turned red. Total guidance failure. No one spoke. The timer stopped. 11.1 seconds. Richard stared through the glass. His face had lost color. Lena slowly removed her headset. The room remained silent. Then she looked up toward him. The janitor was right. Richard walked out. No explanation. No instruction. Only the hard sound of his shoes disappearing down the corridor. An hour later, Marcus entered the employee locker room. His supervisor waited beside the benches. "Mr. Reed." "Morning. You need to come with me." Marcus looked toward the man standing behind him. "Corporate security." Daniel watched from the hallway. "What happened?" Daniel asked. "No idea," Marcus replied. The security officer pointed toward the elevator. "Executive floor." People watched Marcus cross the lobby. Some recognized him from the auditorium. Whispers followed. "That's him. The janitor." He interrupted Caldwell. Marcus entered the elevator. Floor 37. The doors opened. Richard waited inside his office. Lena stood near the window. On the desk was a printed copy of Marcus's equation. Richard did not offer him a chair. "You were right," he said. Marcus remained standing. The simulation failed at 11.1 seconds. Marcus nodded. "You don't seem surprised." "I wasn't guessing." Richard studied him. "Where did you learn this?" Marcus said nothing. "I asked you a question, and I heard it." Richard's jaw tightened. Lena stepped forward. "Mr. Reed, the model you wrote uses a correction theory developed before modern satellite navigation." "Yes." "How do you know it?" Marcus looked toward the window. Rain still covered the city. "Because I helped write it." Silence. Richard stared. "That's impossible." Marcus looked at him. "Why?" "Because the original correction theory was developed by military researchers." "Yes." "The project was classified." "Yes." Richard's expression hardened. "Who are you?" Marcus reached into his wallet. He removed the old photograph. 5 engineers. 1 aircraft. 1 lost world. He placed it on the desk. Lena picked it up. Her eyes widened. "Dr. Evelyn Carter." Marcus nodded. "You knew her?" "She was my friend." Richard looked at the photograph. Then at Marcus. "What project was this?" Marcus did not answer immediately. Outside, thunder moved across Washington. Finally, he spoke. "Project Nightstar." Lena stopped breathing. Everyone in aerospace knew the name. Nightstar had ended in disaster 23 years earlier. A prototype guidance aircraft crashed during a classified test. 6 people died. The investigation blamed engineering failure. The project disappeared. Richard stared at Marcus. You worked on Nightstar? I designed part of the correction system. And the crash. Marcus looked toward the rain. I warned them. His voice became quieter. They didn't listen. Part 5. The second signal the room felt colder. Marcus stood beside the window. For 23 years, he had carried the story alone. Now the words returned. Nightstar had 2 navigation inputs, he explained. Primary satellite guidance and an internal correction model. Lena listened. The satellite's signal arrived late during the final test. The correction system treated old coordinates as current. The same flaw as Aegis, she said. Marcus nodded. I discovered it 3 days before launch. What happened? I reported it. To whom? Marcus looked at Richard. Program director. And he said delaying the test would cost too much. Richard lowered his eyes. Marcus continued. Evelyn believed me. She tried to stop the launch. His voice weakened. She was aboard the control aircraft. Rain struck the windows. No one interrupted. During the test, the guidance system began correcting itself in opposite directions. 11 seconds later, we lost control. Marcus looked at the photograph. 6 people died. Richard sat down. Why weren't you in the investigation? I was. What did you tell them? The truth. And they changed it. Lena frowned. Changed what? The report. Marcus looked toward the equation on the desk. They blamed my correction model. Said I failed to identify the risk. But you warned them. I had copies. What happened? The files disappeared. Richard stood. You're saying the military covered it up? I'm saying powerful people protected a contract. The words remained between them. Richard walked toward the desk. And you left engineering? I was removed. You could have fought. Marcus smiled faintly. You think I didn't? He rolled up his sleeve. A faded scar crossed his forearm. I spent 8 years in hearings. He lowered the sleeve. I lost my job, my house, my marriage. His voice remained calm. That's what happens when truth threatens expensive people. Richard looked away. For the first time, the janitor's uniform seemed different. Not smaller, heavier. Like something Marcus had carried instead of something that defined him. Why work here? Lena asked. Marcus looked around the office. Health insurance. Nothing else. The answer struck harder than anger. Richard looked toward the photograph. Why warn us? Marcus met his eyes. You humiliated me. Yes. You let people laugh. Richard said nothing. You made it clear what you believed I was worth. Marcus picked up the photograph. But pilots would have used that system. He placed it inside his wallet. They didn't insult me. The room became silent. Marcus walked toward the door. Mr. Reed, Richard said. Marcus stopped. I owe you an apology. No, Richard blinked. No. You owe your engineers the truth. Marcus opened the door. And you owe the people who will fly that aircraft a safe way home. Then he left. Richard remained beside the desk. For the first time in years, he had no answer. Part 6. The moment the building became quiet by noon, everyone knew. The janitor had predicted the failure. The engineers had confirmed it. But rumors changed as they traveled. Some said Marcus had hacked the system. Others said he was a retired military scientist. One employee claimed he had worked for NASA. Marcus ignored them. He cleaned the third-floor hallway. People who had never noticed him now stared. Some smiled too much. Some suddenly called him Mr. Reed. Marcus preferred invisibility. At 1:20, he entered the auditorium. The whiteboard remained untouched. His equations covered the surface. Someone had placed a rope around it. A sign read, "Do not erase." Marcus looked at the words. Then he heard footsteps. Lena entered. I wanted to thank you. You tested the system. Thank yourself. We would have presented it to the Pentagon. Marcus cleaned beneath a chair. You found the problem. You found it. Marcus said nothing. Lena sat in the last row. Why didn't you tell anyone who you were? They didn't ask. You let them think you were only a janitor. Marcus stopped. Only. Lena lowered her eyes. He returned to cleaning. My father cleaned schools, Marcus said. He worked nights for 31 years. The mop moved slowly across the marble. He raised 4 children. Never missed a rent payment. Never let us go hungry. Marcus looked at her. There is no only in honest work. Lena nodded. You're right. For several minutes, neither spoke. Rain moved across the glass. The auditorium lights reflected inside the wet floor. Marcus watched the light tremble. It reminded him of the day Evelyn died. Not the explosion. Not the hearings. Something smaller. The last cup of coffee she gave him. She had written a message on the lid. Keep asking the question nobody wants to hear. Marcus had kept the lid for years, then lost it when the bank took his house. He looked toward the equation. His eyes became wet. Lena noticed, but she did not ask. Some grief deserved company, without questions. She sat quietly. Marcus leaned against the mop. Outside, the rain softened. For the first time in 23 years, someone had listened before people died. His warning had mattered. Not after the crash. Before. Marcus closed his eyes. A breath entered. A breath left. And somewhere inside the silence, the weight he had carried shifted. Not gone. Just lighter. If this moment touched your heart, remember Marcus. Not because he was secretly brilliant, but because he chose to protect people who had never protected his dignity. Kindness is not weakness. Sometimes, kindness is the courage to speak after the world has punished you for speaking before. Part 7. The call at 3:46 that afternoon, Richard stood inside a board meeting. The directors demanded answers. Delay the Pentagon demonstration, Lena said. We can't, one director replied. We need 3 weeks. We have 4 days. Then we cancel. The room erupted. $11 billion. Stock prices. Government contracts. Public confidence. Everyone spoke about loss. No one spoke about pilots. Richard sat at the head of the table. He listened. Then he remembered Marcus. They didn't insult me. The sentence returned. The pilots didn't insult me. Richard looked around the table. We delay. Silence. Leonard Pierce leaned forward. Do you understand what that decision costs? Yes. The board may remove you. I understand. You're risking the company. Richard looked toward the Aegis logo. No, he closed the report. I'm refusing to risk lives. The room became still. Then the telephone rang. Not Richard's cell phone. The secure red telephone beside the conference screen. No one moved. That line had only been used twice. Richard answered. Caldwell. A voice spoke. This is General Thomas Whitaker, Department of Defense. Richard straightened. Yes, General. We received your emergency failure report. We are delaying the demonstration. I know. A pause. Who discovered the defect? Richard looked through the glass wall. Far below, Marcus pushed a cleaning cart across the lobby. An employee. Name. Marcus Reed. Silence. Long enough for Richard to look at the phone. Then the general spoke again. Did you say Marcus Reed? Yes. Dr. Marcus Elijah Reed? Richard looked toward Lena. I don't know his middle name. How old? 58. Another silence. Then the general's voice changed. Keep him in the building. Richard frowned. Why? Do not let him leave. General, the Pentagon has been looking for Marcus Reed for 11 years. Every person at the table stopped moving. Richard looked again toward the lobby. Marcus entered an elevator. The doors began closing. Why? Richard asked. The general answered. Because the Night Star investigation was reopened. Richard's grip tightened. And the original files were recovered. The elevator doors closed around Marcus. General Whitaker continued. Marcus Reed was telling the truth. Part 8. The name they erased 2 black government vehicles arrived 40 minutes later. Employees gathered near the windows. 3 military officials entered the lobby. At the center walked General Thomas Whitaker. Silver hair. Dark uniform. 4 stars across his shoulders. Richard waited beside the elevators. Where is he? Maintenance level. The general moved immediately. No cameras. No announcement. Only the sound of military shoes crossing polished marble. They found Marcus inside a storage room. He was repairing a broken wheel on his cleaning cart. The door opened. Marcus looked up. General Whitaker stopped. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then the general removed his cap. Dr. Reed. Marcus stared. No one has called me that in a long time. My name is Thomas Whitaker. I know. You knew my father. Marcus looked toward the floor. Colonel James Whitaker. One of the 6 people killed during Night Star. The general stepped closer. I spent half my life believing your system killed him. Marcus said nothing. I hated your name. The room became silent. Then we found the files. Marcus slowly stood. What files? Evelyn Carter's archive. Marcus stopped breathing. She kept copies? Everything. The general opened a folder. Inside were warning reports. Marcus recognized his signature. 23 years. Disappeared. His hands trembled. She saved them, he whispered. Yes. The general continued. Your warnings. The test data. The orders to proceed. Marcus touched the first page. His younger handwriting covered the margin. Delay test. Guidance instability may cause total loss. He closed his eyes. For years, people had told him memory was not evidence. Pain was not evidence. Truth without power was not evidence. Now it rested inside his hands. Paper. Ink. Proof. The investigation concluded last month, General Whitaker said. Marcus looked up. Why didn't anyone contact me? We tried. I've lived at the same address for 9 years. The general lowered his eyes. Then we failed again. Marcus looked toward Richard. No anger. Only exhaustion. What happens now? The official report will be corrected. And the people responsible. 2 are dead. 1 will face federal charges. Marcus nodded slowly. The general opened another document. The Department of Defense wants to restore your credentials. Marcus almost smiled. 23 years late. Yes. That doesn't restore 23 years. No, the general did not defend himself. That mattered. Then he extended the folder. My father died believing the aircraft could be saved. Marcus looked at him. He stayed in the control aircraft because Evelyn was there. The general's eyes filled. You remember? I remember everyone. Silence filled the storage room. The fluorescent light hummed overhead. General Whitaker extended his hand. Marcus looked at it, then shook it. Not as a janitor. Not as a forgotten engineer. As one man who had lost a friend. And another who had lost a father. Outside, employees had gathered. When Marcus entered the lobby beside the general, the building became silent. Hundreds of people watched. Some had laughed the day before. Some had looked away. Richard stood near the center. He walked toward Marcus, then stopped. Everyone waited. Richard removed his suit jacket. He looked toward the floor. A trail of rainwater had entered behind the government officials. A mop rested beside Marcus's cart. Richard picked it up. People stared. He began cleaning the water. Slowly. Awkwardly. No speech. No performance. Marcus watched. Richard finished. Then placed the mop against the cart. I was wrong, he said. His voice carried across the lobby. I judged your intelligence by your uniform. Marcus remained silent. I humiliated you because your truth threatened my pride. Richard looked toward the employees. And many people laughed because I gave them permission. No one moved. I cannot undo that. He faced Marcus again. But I can say your name correctly. Richard extended his hand. Dr. Marcus Reed. Marcus looked at the hand. Then at Richard. You don't need to call me doctor. What should I call you? Marcus. Richard nodded. Marcus. They shook hands. No applause. Not yet. Marcus leaned closer. Don't become kind because I was important. Richard listened. Be kind when you think someone isn't. The words entered the silence. Richard lowered his eyes. Then nodded. That was when the applause began. Marcus did not smile. He looked toward the maintenance workers standing near the hallway. Daniel was there. His eyes were wet. Marcus raised one hand. Not toward the executives. Toward the people in blue uniforms. The applause grew. Part 9. The light after the rain. 3 months later, Atlas Aeronautics reopened the Aegis program. The system had a new safety architecture. Every correction signal required independent verification. Every engineer could stop a test. No approval needed. No punishment allowed. Above the laboratory entrance hung a sentence. The most important voice may come from outside the room. Marcus refused an executive office. Richard offered one twice. Marcus chose a small workspace beside the simulation laboratory. It had one desk, 2 chairs, and a window facing east. His new title was Senior Safety Director. But every morning, he arrived at 5:35. He still greeted the cleaning staff. He still carried 2 sandwiches. One afternoon, Richard entered his office. Marcus was studying a guidance model. You have a minute? Depends on whether you're going to talk for more than a minute. Richard smiled. He placed a small wooden box on the desk. Marcus opened it. Inside was a coffee cup lid. Old, faded, protected beneath glass. 5 words remained visible. Keep asking the question nobody wants to hear. Marcus stopped. Where did you find this? Evelyn's archive. His fingers touched the glass. For a long time, he said nothing. Outside, sunlight crossed the laboratory floor. Warm. Quiet. Richard moved toward the door. Marcus. Yes. Thank you for warning us. Marcus looked toward the light. You listened. Richard nodded, then left. That evening, Marcus walked through the Atlas lobby. Employees greeted him. "Good night, Marcus. See you tomorrow." Near the entrance, a young janitor struggled with a broken cleaning cart. Marcus stopped. He removed his jacket, then knelt beside him. Together, they repaired the wheel. Outside, the rain had ended. The clouds opened above Washington. Sunlight entered through the glass walls and spread across the marble. For a moment, Marcus saw his reflection. Not the engineer they erased. Not the janitor they ignored. Only a man who had chosen to warn people who laughed at him. A man who had every reason to become bitter, and chose not to. He stood, picked up his jacket, then walked toward the doors. Behind him, the light rested across the small stitched name on the old uniform he had framed beside the lobby. Marcus. No applause followed him. No music. Only footsteps. A quiet breath. And the silence of justice finally arriving. Because kindness had never made Marcus weak. It was the reason he remained strong when power tried to make him cruel. And sometimes the person holding the mop is also the person holding the truth. You only have to be humble enough to listen.